Pow, we're back.
We are back.
Did you see that? I was like even animated about it. I like punched at the camera. It was a whole thing. I hope for the people watching at home in 3D, it was a good effect for them.
Well, you have that youthful energy that I don't have anymore, but I'll let you do it. I'll let you crack through the window and go through it.
Youthful energy. I love how you just say that when we know it's just that I'm downing caffeine 95% of the time.
Fair.
Yes, but
Fair.
youthful energy is yes, that is the word we are going to use for it today.
Absolutely, because this whole movie is full of youthful energy. Let's be honest.
It is full of boobs.
It is full of boobs. It is full of tits and ass, drugs, sex, drugs, rock and roll, the whole nine. This is where we finish.
2009 specifically.
2009. Good job there. This is where we finish the proper Friday the 13th saga. Of course, we are going to go ahead and do the Never Hike Alones as the kind of representative of the great fan film community out there that has really worked up their asses off and done some great work out there. So we will cover those two. But this is
to us, they're canon.
Yeah, absolutely. Because why not? Because nothing else is canon right now. That's the problem. But this is the last movie we've seen on the big screen of Friday the 13th, and here it is. That's 2009.
I know. I was just gonna say that was 15 years ago.
15 years ago since we've seen Jason on the big screen.
It makes me
blows my mind.
So frustrated, actually. It's so funny because I was sitting there watching it and I was just feeling ancient because I remember going opening day and seeing this in theaters in a pretty empty crowd, to be honest. Because I saw it up in Sacramento when I was still living there, and it was like really no one going to see it with me or anything. So it was just me and a couple of others in the theater 15 years ago. I was still a kid, man. Like, I had barely graduated high school.
I wish I was still a kid at that point. I do believe I went and saw this in the theater. I want to say I did. I might not have, because this was a time during my dark ages where I really didn't go to the movie theaters too much because I had kids and I wasn't getting a chance to do that kind of stuff. I did more home viewing of stuff. But I want to say I did go to see this in the theaters. But again, it didn't leave much of an impact on me. The first time I saw it, I wasn't actually a big fan. That has changed. I've grown to enjoy.
And I was going to say, the funny thing is I was in the same place as you.
Oh,
I didn't really enjoy it when it came out.
It has been through a couple of repeat viewings that I've kind of seen a lot of the positive behind it. We'll get to the rankings at the end. Obviously, no spoiler alert, but this is definitely far from the worst, but it's also nowhere near the best either.
And I think what it was for me is over time, and I think that this has also just been a shift in my attitude towards how I watch movies and how I intake them and how I sit with them and stuff, is that when it initially came out, I was very hesitant about someone touching Friday the 13th. Just in general. I just didn't see a world where it made sense to be doing this, or why are we basically redoing the movies instead of making a sequel? Like, why go down this path? Why do this? And I was a lot more cynical back then, and it used to make me mad. And I felt like it was lesser because it was trying to be a compilation film, basically, is what it ended up being. And that's not a bad thing, actually. I think that a lot of what this movie does is ultimately taking Friday 1 through 4 and kind of putting them into a
mashup.
Yeah, a mashup, but finding a more through line story.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I think actually you make a good point, and they make a good point about that too. There's a lot of smart decisions that were made, absolutely, about things to go. One of the 100%. Not so smart decisions is what affected you. Like watching, obviously, we usually mention that for this, we watch the Crystal Lake Memories doc, a segment on these afterwards. And they all kind of said that they didn't really know what to call it. They wanted to, they had a half-heartedly. It was like remake, reboot, kind of sequel. They wanted to make it so it could stand with the others like a sequel, but it still was if they're not, if they can't tell you what it is, how are we supposed to know what it is, and how are we supposed to treat it?
Yeah,
no way. And that's part of the problem, right? I mean, to me, it's definitively a reboot, and they should have had no problem. Call a spade a spade. It is a reboot. There's no way around it. There's so many differences going on between the original storyline, and not that Friday has been any bastion of continuity. Let's be honest. It's
no.
one of the least as far as continuity goes. but enough had been done that they kind of undid. It was a smart decision because it's kind of like what the comic books did with Crisis on Infinite Earths, things like that. There was so much continuity in there. Let's like wipe the slate clean and cherry pick the good stuff that we want to have happen still. And they could make a whole universe out of this. And that would have been great. I would love to have seen more where this would have gone. Of course, that's not meant to be. We're still in the rights of warfare. Still to this day, we're closer. I feel like there's been articles about stuff happening, and we know that the TV
slowly
series
but
happening.
surely. Yeah,
but it's a shame that didn't go the way it's a shame it went the way it went, to be honest with
you. No, it is, because the truth of the matter is I think you kind of nailed it. Is I don't think that this is near the worst of the franchise. In fact, I would argue that it's in the upper echelon overall as a film, because I think it gets all the stuff that we like about Friday the 13th, and I think that everyone who went in to make this, their intentions really were sound with it in a way that I don't think you can say about some of the other ones. Like, not in a mean, backhanded sort of way, but in a, because we hadn't had one of these in so long, like just a standard Friday the 13th film. I'm not talking Jason X or Freddy versus Jason. Like, I'm talking specifically Friday the 13th, because it had been, since the 80s, since we had Takes Manhattan.
And even that is not a traditional in some ways, shape, or form. It's still not a Camp Crystal Lake story. It's
sure, 100%.
So even that is like questionable as far as that goes.
Right. So when you had the people coming in here for this one, and you listen to them talk about it, you can tell how much that these guys loved this franchise. The producers, the writers, like, they really care. Marcus Nispel maybe less so. Him talking about it being like taking something like a sheep to a butcher's block was such a weird choice of words for him talking about this. Look, I'll say this, and they talk about it a little bit in the Crystal Lake Memories too, is like, I actually really like his Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and his Texas Chainsaw Massacre was exactly what got him the job for this.
Correct.
But it doesn't feel like he has reverence for this franchise in the same way that he might have had reverence for Texas Chainsaw.
He basically mentioned, he stated, quite frankly, he did this because he needed a spark again. Like, his career was a little dipping, and he wanted to recapture what he had gotten for his career out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not necessarily his art or his direction or anything else. He got inspired because that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was his first film, and he did Frankenstein, which is a TV movie. He did Pathfinder, which was not a very well received movie. He's like, let's get back to what made me popular. This didn't end up helping too much because he ended up doing the 2011 Conan the Barbarian, 2015 Exeters, and then that's been it.
He's not getting phone calls is what I would say at this point.
I mean, it's not like he's bad at what he does. He definitely knows what he's doing. He knows his way around a camera for the most part, it seems like, and he knows.
I mean, I'll say that his movies look very good most of the time.
And I agree with you. I surprisingly enjoyed the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And you know what? That's of its time. We should actually mention that. Obviously, this is something that was a big thing in the 2000s. This Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, they all got
Amityville
Horror, all got big remakes at the time. It's just kind of like remakes and updated versions also. Because I remember one thing that I noted from the doc as well, which I did not know. It's the second I saw the docs, I kind of have learned it again. I forgot it and learned it again. They initially wanted to set this in the 80s, which would be like, that shows exactly how reverent it is. We want to go back so far. Let's set it in the 80s. The studio was like, no, we got to do the updated modern version. That's what's working right now. That's what worked for Texas Chainsaw. It's working. We need to do that.
Yeah.
So they lost that battle to the studio, which is fine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
And ultimately, I think the movie kind of lives in its own land where, it's updated. But if you told me it was still 80s set, honestly, I'd believe you, because there's really not a ton in the movie that goes the other direction. You know what I mean? Like, it's very stripped down comparatively.
Yeah. Very true.
Which is just one of those things. But I gotta say, like, over time, in how I watch all this stuff, I started looking at it from a point of view of what were they trying to do, and let me vibe with that instead of being angry at it
Yeah.
for being a thing that I didn't ask for or what I wanted it to be. And that's a thing that you and I talk about on here a lot, and it's a thing that I continue to go back to these days. Is I'm a big believer in giving everything its justice and
Yeah.
like really giving it a chance to be its thing. And I think people are so quick to be angry these days about movies and feeling like they're only the ones that are right about a franchise. And that's where you get a lot of the gatekeeping that you see in Star Wars and Star Trek and Doctor Who and all the every fandom has this pocket of people that is so loud and so frustrating. And I
Mhm.
think because you and I have been in this space for so long and I have been around people who work in film and television and you just hear all these stories about how hard all of it is and things like that, it really makes me go back and reappreciate movies in a new way when I revisit them. And it can help change my outlook on things too, because I have softened a lot on being angry when a thing is not the thing that I want it to be, and
Yeah.
instead accepting it for what it is. Which is probably why I am such a bigger proponent for the Star Wars sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
Um, Warts and all, I actually think all the way through Rise of Skywalker, it is telling a very good story. The one that it's got its own issues like everything else, but
Absolutely.
I actually think that Rise of Skywalker ultimately is not the heaping hellfire cesspool that everyone seems to think it is.
I agree with you 100% on that as well. I
Yeah.
still haven't quite enjoyed it out of it, to be completely honest. In fact, because it went through such a assassination, I found that I didn't watch it for a long time again, mainly because I was tired of the discourse. So I was
Yeah,
denying myself
100%.
again. So I went and watched it not too long ago, a couple months, like a month or so ago, and I realized like how much fun I had with it. I was like, you know what, this is new Star. This was new Star Wars. I still had a lot of fun time. I like the Ray versus Kylo Ren stuff. The last time I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ending. I enjoyed it a lot. Like there
Yeah,
was a lot to like at the end. I like when Lando steps forth and comes through at the end of the Battle of Mexico. Sure, is it like a little bit of an Avengers Portals knockoff kind of thing? A little bit, but it works. It works for
but
me.
it works. Yeah.
So maybe I still got some tingles going on there. So it worked for the theme what they were going for, that the people were fighting back. And I consider doing a whole thing about Rise of Skywalker, and I probably will at some point on Holy Snokes. But I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
No, right. And so all that being said, and I guess especially through the pandemic when I started really going back and watching a lot of stuff while we were all still doing lockdown, and I would watch through these franchises, and during the middle of the pandemic, Shout put out the Friday box set.
Right, right.
And it was the first time I had really revisited 2009, probably since it had come out. Like I'd maybe seen it once between that time, but it was not one that I watched a lot.
Mm.
Usually if I'm rewatching a Friday movie, it's gonna be 4 or 6, Jason X. Like I have my favorites, and those are the ones I tend to go back to. But in revisiting this one over the pandemic, I ended up watching it several times,
Okay.
way more than I had ever seen it. And I really started to come around on it in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. Um, Specifically and mainly, and I will take this to my grave till the end of time, that the best portrayal of Jason on film is in this movie. Derek Mears' Jason is a one of a kind type of performance. And
I
oh,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanna jump in about that and say, like, you've really been beating this drum to me for the
Yeah.
longest time since I've known you. I remember the
Yeah.
first time you said, I was kinda like, "Okay, sure," 'cause I'm a Kane Hodder guy, I've always been a Kane Hodder
I
guy.
know. I get
I
it.
love Kane Hodder.
We all
But
do.
I gotta admit, the more time I see him, I don't know if I can say he's my favorite of all time, but I get what you mean now, and I think he's definitely a worthy Jason. And justice for Derek Mears, he put his heart and soul into this. And
That's exactly it, man.
the documentary really
Yeah.
proves that. Like he was so all in. He did everything in his power to do the right thing. He loved talking to Kane. He tried to make everything out. He tried to make it fun of the set for everybody. He seemed like he's willing to do anything. Again, drop of a hat, he would just come back. Yeah, absolutely. And if he doesn't, he's like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I got my time in the sun. That's all. Like that kind of magnanimity is not found in Hollywood very often. And he is just.
No. I
But
wanna have a
yeah, you're
beer with
right.
Derek Mears.
I would love to have a beer with Derek Beers. Absolutely. I think that's
Like,
what everybody else
honest
said
to God.
too.
Yeah. I tell you guys right now, if someone can get in contact with Derek Mears for us for the podcast, so we can have a beer with Derek Mears and just shoot the shit and talk to him, I'd be the happiest I've ever been in my life about anything. I
Absolutely.
fucking love Derek Mears, and this performance that he gives, like I said, this is like a one of a kind of performance that you can only get from someone who just genuinely loves the material and a character so much that they like you can feel that excitement and that
Passion.
just palpable like love
Yeah.
coming off of him in every frame. And like his Jason is hulking and scary and monstrous and mean and like
Mhm.
just the meanest son of a bitch you have ever met. And yet I just love it. His
Yeah.
movements, it's fast, it's scary. You don't really get fast Jason very often. And to have a fast Jason who's also, 6.5 feet tall, looming down on you, still to this day, my favorite shot of Jason, and arguably the most scariest, in my opinion, is the low shot right before it cuts to the Friday the 13th
Mm.
logo and splash card, where the girl is on the ground screaming, and he's already burned one of them inside of the,
The sleeping
sleeping
bag, yeah.
bag and killed the other one with the machete through the head. And he
Yep.
starts hulking down on her and he's running. And it's just that it's a low level shot from her point of view.
Right.
And just that seeing that is terrifying.
Absolutely, 100%.
Derek Mears, man.
Wonderful, wonderful work there, I gotta say. It's funny they mentioned running Jason specifically. Like, this isn't the first time that Jason's ran the franchise, but, like, you kind of forget that over time. Like,
Yeah,
he had, like, because when you picture Jason, you think of the slow, lumbering walk, the menacing walk, kind of like Michael Myers to a degree. They don't get very fast. However, if you go back to the original, the original, like, 2, 3, and 4, he did a lot of running. Of course, he was an older man playing him at the time, so his run wasn't quite as effective, I don't think. That's
right.
what it was. But getting this younger, really powerfully built man to start running down on you, absolutely is terrifying. It is terrifying beyond belief at that point.
Well, it is. And I think that there's a moment later in the movie where two of the characters finally get to Crystal Lake, the camp,
Mhm.
and they're watching him.
Right.
And he's like, Jason knows that someone's there
Yeah.
and he's just mad.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he's not just like pretending that he doesn't know they're there. He doesn't know how to control his emotions, so he's just fucking pissed.
Yeah.
And Jason starts running around grabbing the different like kayaks and throwing them on the ground and he's just like wrecking shop and it's scary.
It
And
is.
there's this moment where he stops and they're just kind of watching him and you just watch Mears
Yeah.
and his movements. Like again, he clearly loves this character in the way that Kane Hodder loved this character.
Yeah.
And there's just this way he stops and like you watch his eyes and he's kind of like he still knows they're there, but he knows he doesn't know where they're at this point, and he's not gonna really keep going after them.
Right.
He wants them to trip up.
Yeah.
And so he just grabs the bodies that he has and he starts walking away again. But
Right.
you just watch the movements and it's fucking scary because this is like a tactical feral version
He's a wild
of
animal.
Jason.
He is a
Yeah.
wild animal. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, no, it's great. Derek Mears is definitely gives a wonderful performance. That's one of the very big positives about this movie. Um, Now let's get into the idea that all right. So we talked about how there's a bunch of different remakes during 2000s and everything else. When you approach Friday the 13th, there's a unique problem that Friday the 13th has versus any other franchise where you're going to remake the franchise or remake the first film. But the first film is not the one you can really remake in Friday the 13th anymore because no one wants to see a Jason-less Friday the 13th at this point.
Correct.
And it's so strange to think about. Like when you go back that original film with Mama Voorhees as the killer, Jason has a little kid cameo at the end. That's all we got of Jason. And so how can
Yeah.
you sit there and go, studios beside themselves wouldn't do it. And then even as an artistic guy, I'm kind of like, I could see someone like really going artistically, I gotta remake the first film and make it, but it wouldn't be nearly as successful. And it wouldn't be nearly as fun. And
No.
people would be waiting to see when Jason comes in. And
People would just be
that's what
mad.
yeah, absolutely. So how do
And
you
here's
solve
the
that?
thing. Yeah, well, and to your point, right? They had this problem.
Mhm.
That's how they had to look at it and go into it because again, here's what we have to remember. 7 rolls around when this really starts the ball rolling and this movie is gonna happen.
Right.
And we're in a world where Texas Chainsaw has gone over huge. A lot of the J-horror stuff has been remade over here, so you get The Ring, you get The Grudge. People are loving on these remakes of things,
Yeah.
For better or worse, honestly.
Yeah.
I always tend to lean on sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. A lot of the Platinum Dunes stuff genuinely doesn't for me most of the time. This
Yeah.
is the rare exception because their bread and butter became a lot of those remakes. Like,
Yeah.
because they did the Black Christmas one from the
Yep.
2000s and what was it? The Last House on the Left, they did
Yep.
that one. They did a bunch of these.
Yeah.
This was the first time one of them really took off for me, but you could tell even when they were writing it, they were like, "We can't do Friday the 13th again." Like,
Right.
you can't. You literally can't. So what do? The movie starts at the end of Friday the 13th.
What a great way. I'd actually, when I first noticed, was a smart idea to start the movie at the end of the first one. You give us your Jason origin story right away. Um, and I will say it's a great idea to do that. However, I wasn't sure about having to try. This is one of the negatives. I think, again, one of those ideas good on paper, but in execution makes it a little kind of a struggle. We had 24 minutes go by
Uh-huh.
in the movie before we get the title card. So it's almost like 24 minutes of a prequel, like a prologue. And in that time, we have Jason killing a group of teenagers, which is basically a whole Friday the 13th movie usually. Instead, we see
Yeah.
it happen in 20 minutes, and then we get an introduction to all new characters and our leading characters and our protagonists. And it's kind of like, oh, you almost feel tired a little bit. You're like, because you just had gotten into these characters.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, and that's it. Okay, wait, okay, they're all dead now. Okay, and now you're like, wait, now I got to shift and we got to start again.
Well, to be fair, one of them survives.
Right, which but we didn't know that at the time.
Oh, I know.
Really?
And that the thing is that prologue is great on paper, but you don't realize that one of those characters really is one of the characters who is Jared Padalecki's sister.
Sister, right.
And so like it does end up tying in, but the funny thing to your point is I actually wish that the whole movie had been that 30 minutes at
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Because I find those characters more fun and more interesting overall than most of the characters we end up spending
Oh,
time
how
with.
interesting. How interesting. You're not wrong though. You're not wrong.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about that too. They
but
do a lot more
it's
with the
just
time spent. Yeah.
because they're so all the characters in that portion of the movie are also insufferable,
Right.
but they're like the fun kind of insufferable. They're the
Mm,
kind that you're almost rooting for them to die, but then when it starts to like ratchet up, you actually feel bad and
right.
you're actually like kind of rooting for them to get away.
Right.
The big problem that this movie ultimately has for me is that I find most of the characters, once you get past that title card, to be the insufferable, please just murder most of them. Like,
Yeah.
and they don't really do anything with them. And again, I know that this is a Friday the 13th film, and I know that I should anticipate that it's just going to be Jason murdering a bunch of really insufferable teenagers.
Right.
But because this was a new introduction in the way that they were handling it, they really do try to make Clay kind of interesting, or they try to make Jenna seem likable, but then, like, nothing matters to me, I feel
Right.
like, about any of the other characters.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, this is where it really becomes a CW show. Let's be honest. I mean, quite
Yeah,
frankly,
Friday
I
the
couldn't tell
13th,
you.
CW.
I couldn't tell you any of the names of any of the characters. Honestly, I was like, it's Sam Winchester and Killer Frost, and it's Dick. It's Dick
Yeah,
Cassavetes. It's like, all like, that's what I think of them as because they're
yeah,
not real characters. They're just these like archetypal fill me in with whatever you think of me kind of thing, kind of characters. Nothing good about it. So that's part of the problem too. But I can't remember any of your characters' names. I remember Trent's name only because I was thinking in my head Trent the Toolback. That's all I could say. Like I got that in my head for some reason. Okay, that's Trent the Toolback,
but
and
her
that's
tits were stupendous.
I gotta say. I love that line. I think that's one of the best lines in the movie because it is
Oh my
so
god.
awful. If anybody ever said that to any
Oh,
woman, like that'd be interesting. Like it's over.
yeah.
We're done. We're done here.
Travis Van Winkle might be the best that smug asshole character types of all time.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
anytime he pops up in anything,
Mhm.
he's always just the most smug asshole type character, and yet he seems like the world's nicest guy in reality, which kills me.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point there. I mean, quite frankly, it kind of reminds me of William Zabka of the. He's like the William
Yeah,
Zabka of the of the later 2000s,
yeah,
whatever. Great dude. I mean, we see him now in Cobra Kai. Luckily, he's back in Cobra Kai and everything. But he's the guy who popped up in all these 80s movies, and he always played the smuggest, richest asshole that was just you wanted to see to get his ass handed to him. And
yeah.
you just kept wanting to see Sam Winchester and Dean come out of nowhere and they go to town on this guy. That's what we want to see happen. Um, although,
And here's the weird thing about the Trent character too. A thing that I still don't understand it to the end of, and I will probably never understand this. That character Trent appears in another Michael Bay film,
yeah,
and not just the character, the actor playing the character, because that is Megan Fox's boyfriend in the first Transformers.
right. Characters have different last names, but that's really kind of as far as it goes differences wise.
Right.
It's still
But
Trent the
it's
tool bag.
really weird.
Yeah.
It feels very much like they are attempting a weird Platinum Dunes crossover.
Because that's one we always needed, Friday the 13th and Transformers.
So in some capacity, the Michael Bay Transformers movies all live in a world where Jason also lives. If I don't see Optimus Prime fighting Jason in an upcoming movie, what are we even doing?
Well, you know what? That actually brings up another point for me in a way, in a weird kind of twisted kind of way. What I said before, they didn't know if they wanted to do a remake or reboot or whatever. It seems like a lot of the problems they have is they don't know which way to completely commit, and
Yep.
they mostly commit to Jason being a man in this one. He's not supernatural, except for the fact that they do point out that he drowned and came back to life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was a dumb decision. Whatever, it's one line to throw away. And I know that's how the original lore is supposed to go, but you have an opportunity here. You don't want Supernatural Jason. Fine, I love Supernatural Jason, but I get if you want to go down a different path with this remake or whatever. You could have had the mom be nuts and like say he almost drowned. And that's why she went off on a killer thing, and that's why he still witnessed it. And then it makes everything after that completely no supernatural attachments at all. But again, they had to kind of go a little half in, half out. They couldn't really. I don't know why you don't do it. Go all in on something. Figure out something to go all in on.
I think it becomes the problem with the movie's ending too, and it's one of those because they had gone like kind of half in, half out without really doing anything with it. I think that had they not cornered themselves with the end of the film and the wood chipper, I don't think a sequel would have been nearly as hard to get off the ground while they still had the rights before the rights stuff got really convoluted. But I think that they wrote themselves into a corner, realizing that we really never established him as a supernatural Jason.
Yeah.
And we put him into a fucking wood chipper. Like, this isn't one of the little, like, weird things in one of those movies where you can get away with it because you've brought
established, right?
Yeah. But you grounded him as a man.
Mm-hmm. How do you get back from that?
And you put him into a wood chipper.
Mm-hmm. And then I gotta say, I got a little time jump issues here a few times, but specifically at the end. I mean, we're all over the place in this review. We were spoiling everything at this. Obviously,
we're just talking at this point.
Yeah,
it's a comment.
At the end, we had that fake ending, and like so they dumped Jason's
body.
Have to do one. We also have to do one. I mean, they didn't. I mean, they had trouble with this one. They said that, so they dumped the body in the lake. The lock goes down. The mask falls off the body and hits the ocean floor. And like that's the shot they dwell on for a minute, like, and then 2 seconds later, he somehow has the mask back on. He's jumping through the dock, and I'm like, wait, he what? He just went through a wood chipper. He now has the what? What the hell's going on here?
Like and I think it's one of those. Are we supposed to assume that it didn't actually happen? Is it only in the mind thing? Because Friday is very famous for. Did the endings actually happen or not?
Right.
And I don't know if you noticed it, actually. They also did the Jason coming through the window thing.
Yes, they did. Yes, I did notice
because
that.
they made sure, although they should have left the camera on that a little longer because it cuts really fast, but they definitely do Jason coming through the window very Friday Part 2, which I really
Right.
like. Um, there's a lot of that in this movie too. There's a
Yeah.
lot of really good fan service. There's a lot of that's why this movie is so much fun, I think, ultimately.
Agreed.
And why even though I think that it has its own issues of like not necessarily picking a lane of is it a remake? Is it not? Like, is he supernatural? Is he not? Are the characters that interesting? It has its own issues, but at the same time, there's so much to like in the fan service side of it, and the way that they handle Jason and the murder. Like, so many of the kills in this are awesome. Like, this movie looks amazing. The kills are fun, and it just loves so much the Friday films. And I do wish we had like a Crazy Ralph character, and I guess that the lady is supposed to kind of be that
That's what
when
I
he
put on my
goes,
notes. That's my notes I
yeah,
added. This is the crazy Ralph-esque kind of character. Although she looks more like the granny character from which one? I don't
yeah,
know. Part 5, I think it is. Sorry, 5 when
yep.
yeah. Kind of looks like that, but yeah, I think it's supposed to be the crazy Ralph-esque character. Which is fine.
But when it does this stuff, it does it with such reverence, and I think, again, it really helps that Mears is such a fan, and the
Yeah.
writers were such fans that they really pushed to make sure that you're watching a Friday the 13th film. We
Mhm.
want you to have the best time watching a Friday the 13th film because I think they also knew that there was a chance that they weren't gonna do another.
Yeah.
And I think that they all had, they said it took them over a year just to get the rights
Mhm.
to make one movie.
Right. Say we're gonna do it all in one shot if they could, which is why they wanted to do the first
Yeah,
4. Because let's be honest, the first 4 are kind of like that holy ground of Friday the 13th. 5 kind of
right.
let them down. 6 became its own thing. We love, you and me both love 6
Yeah.
and 7
Oh my
for
god,
that
it's the
matter.
best.
But at that point, like it's beyond the holy ground of canonicity or whatever the first
Correct.
realm is, first era of Friday the 13th. Speaking of that lady, of the Ralph-esque lady, I want to point out one more missed opportunity that I saw in this film, which I don't know would have worked or not, but I actually really think could have made this a little bit unique, and it's kind of based a little bit off Freddy vs. Jason in a way. So Sam Winchester comes and gives. I'm just going to call him that. That's who it is. Winchester comes, gives the lady the flyer. Starts talking about it. It's the first time he gets any kind of break at all, and she
Yeah.
just comes out and is like, you know what? If she's messing around here, she dead. And she basically says that Jason's alive and Jason does these killings, and that if we leave him alone, then he leaves us alone, and that's what people from the outside don't understand. And you guys got to just knock it off, and you'll whatever. And I almost wanted to make that be a continuing thread of Crystal Lake to the point where like I wanted like kind of like how they did with Nightmare and like we don't talk about Freddy at all. We don't do
Yeah.
like I wanted to have the cops be in on it. Like how the cops go, they know Jason exists there, but he's such a
Yeah.
fucking badass. Like, you know what? Just let this fucking guy live off the lead over there and let's just
I
not bother
actually
him.
I 100% agree with you. And it's funny because I actually think a storyline worth exploring would have been the people going to Crystal Lake are ultimately the villains, and
Yes.
to make it that Jason's actually protecting it. And I think that that's actually why the first half of the movie works so well for me because that's kind of what you get at.
Yeah,
These are
because
people who are coming up there looking for the
the weed.
weed.
Right. To
And
carve
so there's
off
this
part of the land. Yeah.
yeah. And like this idea that Jason is protecting the land and protecting the people around it, it almost makes it a little more interesting because
Yes.
you're now granted, obviously, we don't want to say Jason's a hero,
No,
but I
no.
also don't hate the idea of Crystal Lake potentially looking at him as
Right.
someone who protects them. And
Right.
I think that would actually be interesting.
Absolutely. Because I think the best part about that is you could have the cops be there. And when the cops, I think it gives you reason, it gives the story reason why the cops don't show up. It's like they call it a
Mhm.
murder and they go up, like, where is it? At Crystal Lake? That's Jason territory. He's got it. That
I
kind of
think
thing
that
in a way.
yeah, I do wonder though if part of why they can't do that is that you start to run too close into Texas Chainsaw territory because in a lot of ways that's what Texas Chainsaw really
Mhm.
is that
That's true.
the people around there, including the cops, are all kind of involved.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I don't they probably don't wanna ape too hard off of it,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I like the idea of it would be different, right? Because
Yeah.
for so long, anytime you've made one of these or even written a comic book or whatever it is, everyone in Crystal Lake is a victim.
Yeah.
Like, they've lived under the oppression of this, uh, way that people look at the town now, and, like, what does that do to people? You stop getting tourists and things like that when they come up there because of all of it, and that's really fascinating, and it works. But I love the idea of going the other direction where it's actually like the people in Crystal Lake actually almost, I wouldn't say worship him, but like they protect him because
Yeah.
they are protected by him. And I
Yeah.
think that that is a thing that this movie could have probably done and
Yeah.
done it well.
It just I felt like the ending there, not the ending, but they call in when Sam and Killer Frost make it back to the Toolbag's house there, and there's the murder. They call in the murder,
Yeah.
and then the cops come on. My apartment, my head was like, it'd be so great if the cops didn't, like, they drove by and then they drove by real quick and just like kept going. It would have been a great moment to be like, what the fuck? And like, shit, like they already didn't help Sam out earlier. Like, it is like, give it up.
Right.
Like, it would have made a great little, flair to the story, I think. But it is what it is. It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, but also we get a really great kill too.
We do, we do. I'll give you that. I gotta say though, you bring up the Texas Chainsaw Massacre part again, and I saw this last night as well as I watched it. Nispel did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which we know, and we said he did
Oh
a good
yeah.
job at it, and I think he did a good job at it as well. There's another horror director who did a remake of a classic horror franchise and made his own version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre out of it. Rob Zombie doing Halloween.
Correct.
I got to be completely honest. Marshall Nispel loved Texas Chainsaw Massacre so much. This is kind of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre version of Friday
Yeah.
the 13th. To be completely
No, it
honest,
totally is.
you got the whole living off the land, dark territory, and everything else. Freddy, Jason is very, he's kind of more emotionally damaged Jason in this one than he ever is in the previous ones. In the previous ones, he
Yeah.
tends to be more, I am just a force of evil kind of
Yes,
thing.
correct.
This, he kind of feels like a wounded animal, like you said, that feral wounded animal. And that always feels more Texas Chainsaw Massacre to me. I wonder if Nispel tried to ape that because he loved Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or he just knew that was a successful way to do things and people loved it. I don't think it hurt the film necessarily, like not as much as Rob Zombie hurt Halloween 1 with it, I think. But it's still, I wonder if we could have, I don't know.
It's interesting you say that because I actually think you're right in some capacity, but I don't think it was Nispel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's Derek Mears because the more you listen to him when he talks about it, he was very in on showing the emotion of Jason in a way he felt like they hadn't done before, which is why he actually prefers the original ending of the movie where the mask comes off.
Right.
And you see him looking more confused and hurt that his mother, because as it turns out, Whitney, Clay's sister, looks very much like Mama Voorhees in the same way we've seen in the past films.
Right.
And he feels like betrayed
Yeah.
by the fact that Mother is killing him.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of that comes from Mears, more than anything.
You absolutely right. I gotta say, as much as I love Mears, I disagree with him. I think the ending they chose is the better ending. As far as that goes,
I see both sides.
I see both sides, but I think ultimately, if I had to pick one myself, if I was the guy who said I get to choose between point A or point B, I would have chosen point A, keeping the mask on. It's something a little more. You don't want too much sympathy for Jason, or it ends up being a different kind of movie. I think we had gotten a little bit of sympathy. I think we got just enough. I mean, this is almost like the argument we had with Michael Myers crying, right?
Oh yeah,
It's that kind of thing. I feel like that would have been a step too far in the direction. Because it almost becomes like when we see him with his mask off, we're reminded of him as a kid, and so we're almost looking at a kid getting killed again in a way, because that's his mind level. That's his where his level of brain activity is at this point. So that I think ruins it a little, just enough. So I think it was a smart idea to keep the mask on.
I don't disagree with you. I gotta say too, the most interesting thing about this movie, I think, for me, is that they really, for how far the Friday franchise had gone to this point.
Right.
Like, we've gone to space, he's gone to hell, he finally fought Freddy, and they spent so much time trying to make a sequel to Freddy vs. Jason that just never panned out.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, I still contend that Freddy vs. Jason versus Ash not happening as a movie is ultimately the thing that started. Like, we know Texas Chainsaw is the big movie remake that works and people go.
Right.
But it's not until Friday hits again that they seem to really start tracking on doing it with the bigger horror icons again. Like Halloween happens in '07 and it does well,
Did well, box office wise.
but I really think that Freddy versus Jason versus Ash not happening ultimately is the thing that kind of opened the floodgates in a very different way. Because at that point, now they think, oh, if this happens and we do Friday and it does well, we can touch anything.
Right.
Because Michael's a character who had been reinvented enough times to that point in different capacity that I think that doing the Halloween reboot made sense in some way.
Yeah.
Friday never really got to that point in a
Yeah.
way that made sense. Like they should have probably,
Yeah.
but they never did. And so to take all that like big sprawling stuff and then decide, but we're going to scale it all back down
Right.
and we're going to do like a in the woods film, people, just teenagers being killed left and right. We're just going to do that movie.
It
It was kind
makes
of a gamble.
sense. It is definitely
Yeah.
a gamble. I definitely agree to say it's actually kind of fun. I'm gonna take a page out of our friend Lego who does review on this
Oh,
channel
yes,
with me.
yes.
She actually started her own Friday the 13th watch it with Kirk Higgins. They just did their own first episode, and she was mentioning
Nice.
it, and I loved it. It's a great episode, you guys. You can go check that out on her channel, the Unhinged Binge. It's really good. They go into more of a like behind the scenes production stuff. Like that's what she did a lot of research on the production stuff, which is kind
Yeah.
of I actually view it as a very
I
good
do that.
companion piece to this movie, to our
Yeah.
show, in a way. But regardless, she had a point towards the end that like Friday the 13th as a franchise never took itself too seriously, and which is why it's probably of the big three the most consistent of the franchises. Because Halloween had like the very artsy, like that's one of the greatest horror films slash greatest films of all time. Halloween, the original
Right.
Halloween. Nightmare had a very big serious moment in there. Friday the 13th was always kind of looked at like they ripped off Halloween. They went in ripping off Halloween.
Yeah.
And they never really they just kind of had fun the whole time through. So even like when you're that consistently not taking yourself seriously, your lows and your highs just don't ever really go as far.
They don't, yeah, they don't, because you're just kind of stagnant
there the whole time. And like she admittedly, and I agree, said probably the worst. The Friday 13th is still probably worse than a lot of the right. Jason Goes to Hell might be worse than any of them. So she'll take that back a little bit.
Easy.
But overall, as a consistency base, that's an important decision when it comes to remaking the film. You could remake this and not be quite as precious about it, and make it work. I think that's why this one worked better than like say Nightmare did, to be honest with you. Because Nightmare, they changed a few things and it really kind of changed the heart of the story of the first one.
Yeah.
I'm talking basically about the pedophilia angle that really went in on that in 2010, and it just really ruined the fun of the franchise.
Yeah, because you can't really back that character at that point, right?
Right.
Like
exactly. You can gleefully share a slasher because that's what we do in a joking kind of way. But Friday Nightmare on Elm Street did a good job of like it's there in the background, but it's so far in the background you could pretty much ignore it. He's more just a dream demon killing teenagers or whatever. Okay, I could get on board with that. But then coming around to this one, you're not so precious about it. You can mash up 4 films of work pretty much and make it work still. And that's why I think this was a ripe one for that kind of remake.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so interesting because I think Lego kind of nails all this. I think that Friday ultimately benefited from kind of being that just like low level. Like even the producers and all the writers always joke about the continuity and stuff. They never took it that seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that because of that, it allowed you to open the door to doing a movie like this, but that inherently becomes the problem also, because now no one knows what to call the movie, including everyone involved in it. Everyone's calling it reboot, remake, sequel, interquel. Like they throw out every term imaginable talking about this movie, and you go, huh, literally no one is on the same page.
Right, exactly. That's where it becomes kind of a problem.
But
Again,
it's okay.
But it's okay. Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's one of the things like it's not even like it ends up not being that big a deal because of the franchise that it's in. I mean,
So I have to ask you
Right.
in all of this, because as we're talking about it, and clearly we both like this movie much more than I think most people.
I agree.
Um,
I think so.
I think that we look at it in a very different light. We both see its issues, but we both agree that there's actually a lot of good in this. If you had had a chance, would you in the time of this, would you have rather gotten this film, or would you have rather actually gotten a sequel to Freddy versus Jason that had, like, continued that trend at the time to move it forward, or did you like that they attempted this instead? Because that's a very different question on
Yeah.
this era.
Yeah, no, if you're 'cause see, asking me for a Freddy versus sequel Jason sequel versus this is always gonna be difficult because, A, I love Robert Englund so much that would have given me another opportunity to have Robert Englund as Freddy.
Right.
Which obviously Freddy vs. Jason was the last time that Robert Englund played Freddy, really, truly. I mean, yeah, I know he had the appearance
Yeah,
in the Goldbergs and things like
and
that,
it
but,
made me
like
happy.
right, and that's fine, but, like, that's really Freddy's last stand, so to speak. So, yeah, on that note, right away, give me Freddy again. And I think that could open the doors up to a different version of things where we could have had a lot more fun in terms of 80s franchises and mashing things up, mixing things together. We could have had a lot of fun that way. However, that being said, I think these films do better when they reinterpret themselves. I think it might have been the better decision for for the property itself to kind of let's re-solidify ourselves in our franchise without having to we got to come home and really solidify our own franchise before we try to do more of these kind of crazy stuff out there. So I guess personally, selfishly, give me Freddy vs. Jason 2 all day. Especially knowing
Yeah,
that like Ash would have been involved potentially if that could have worked out well. That'd been so much great, grandiose action fun, lot of fan service in the best way possible kind of stuff. But yeah, so selfishly, Freddy vs. Jason 2, if I'm going for my head, probably better to do Friday like them as
yeah.
this film kind of here.
I think ultimately, for how much I wanted a sequel to Freddy versus Jason for so long, I think ultimately they made the right choice.
Mhm.
Waiting around trying to really figure out another Freddy versus Jason just kind of felt like a fool's errand, I feel like. And I think especially with how they just didn't know, because every adaptation that they tried to do, there was the Ash one very famously, which eventually became a comic, but they had one
Mhm.
with Pinhead. There was the hope of putting Michael in. Like, they kept doing all these different possible sequels.
Right.
And it just, like, it took so long just to get Freddy versus Jason that I think ultimately it was probably best to move another direction and just go, you know what? Screw it. We're just going to do a Friday the 13th film. And I think we were better for it in a lot of ways, because I do think that when they did this, and I think we've kind of beat this a little bit, but it became a film that was a love letter to the franchise in a
Right.
way that I don't think another Freddy versus Jason might have been.
No, 'cause you gotta share those franchises at that point. It's
Right.
diluted at that point. And actually, let me interject real quick because my point the point you're making right now is exactly one of the points I had that I didn't bring up before, is my heart wanted the Freddy vs. Jason sequel because that's what my heart wanted, the purity. But the
Yeah.
actual idea of the sequel itself, we already even heard rumblings that when Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell were getting involved with Ash, they were trying to tool it to be another more Evil Dead movie. And it would have been this like warfare over like which franchise wins, which franchise gets the most attention
Yeah.
to it. And that means one of the other franchises would have had been slighted if it even had happened. And
Yeah.
that becomes a dangerous thing. It works once, and they had a very good like build up to make that work once. But then it starts being, all right, well, I got to do this for Friday. I got to be protective of Nightmare. I got to be protective of this, that, and everything. It starts to become a kind of a rough idea to go on. So again, you continue now with that though. That's exactly what I think part of the point is, though.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I mean, in talking about all this, and I know that we're kind of in the fields, as it were, of the wilderness years of the Friday the 13th films to
Yeah.
even get here.
Yep.
Uh, we ultimately did get the Freddy versus Jason sequel. They did turn that script into a comic.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't know necessarily how it would have turned out as a movie, of course. Like, this is just keeping in mind that we don't know
Right.
fully how the movie would have turned out.
Of course.
That script that they turned into a comic actually ended up being a pretty even-handed mix of the 3 franchises in a way that I don't think is necessarily always easy or even
Mm,
possible. And more so, I would say, maybe it was better that it didn't happen that way because by doing it as a comic, you're not asking for the ego of anyone involved
right,
to play on it.
right,
And so in them telling that version of the story in a comic book, you can tell that story and get the
whatever.
perspective and the worlds of all 3 of them in a much more specifically well thought out way that feels even across the board.
Right,
When
exactly.
you're doing a movie, to your point, if you have Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell come on, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell are gonna want Ash to win because The Evil Dead is their baby.
Right.
They're not just an every other horror franchise, right? To that point, there was still only 3 Evil Dead movies that they were involved
Yeah,
in.
yeah, absolutely. Like
And
that.
so, yeah, it was their baby. You had to treat it with respect. And ultimately, I do think the comic does, but I also understood where they were coming from. And Raimi deciding, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to make a sequel to Evil Dead. Now, granted, he waited another decade, but we got there.
We got there eventually, right?
It was the long way around, but we got there.
Right.
Um, I think that this was the right move
I do too.
because you got to make a movie that reminded people why Jason was cool again. You got a movie that reminded people why Jason was scary again. And one of the things that this movie does really well in that is it actually has quite a few really good slow build moments that have Jason just stalking and being hidden and just waiting and being tactical and different, and he's scary every single time. That scene on the water when she sees Jason on the side and he's just watching her as she's drowning, and then she
Yeah.
finally, like, gets to the side and he hunts her down is all time.
What did you think of the alternate version that Derek we was talking about? The idea, like they had an idea to. The
Of
idea
just letting
was
her
that
drown.
let her drown. Like they cut from him on on the side of the water, just watching her. Every time she moved, he'd just kind of move with her back and forth. They would cut away, go to the
Yeah.
back to the Toolbag's house, and they'd come back, and it'd be dark at that point, and it'd still be just like Jason there watching, and she drowns because she has nowhere to go.
I mean, I prefer that one, to be
Yeah,
honest,
something kind of
because
very
that
sick
feels
about it. Yeah,
yeah, and again, it feels very this Jason, right? Because one thing that this movie
it's just
also does in such an interesting way, we have seen the inside of Jason's, like, hobby hut, that's what I'm just gonna call it, a few times,
hobby hut.
but
Okay.
his hobby hut, but this one is, like, really weird and
Yeah.
creepy in a, like,
Texas
there's
Chainsaw
the
Massacre kind
bus
of way.
yeah, in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre sorta way, honestly, like, there's the
Yeah.
tunnels under the ground and all the, like, traps he has set up where people hear people walking by and they scream, but no one can hear them, and
Right.
it's really creepy and really weird, and it just makes this Jason look that much more psychotic.
Is this inspired by Halloween Resurrection as well? The tunnels outside the Myers house?
It kind of felt well, I mean, did you also get the "Get off me, motherfucker," and, it seems very, trick or treat, motherfucker, like, I was not lost on me.
Yeah, you know what? That makes a lot of sense there. I mean, you cherry pick and make some stuff good out of shit like that. That works. That works.
Sometimes it's good to take something that didn't quite work and finding a way to make it work.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like this movie does with certain things. And again, like they d- we finally get this reveal of how he gets the mask. And in this one, we actually see it compared to Friday Part 3, where
Right.
Jason just gets the mask. We know that he must have killed Shelly for it, but we never see it.
Right, right. How funny would it have been they actually mentioned that, like Shelly appearing in this one, like having just being a townsman who hands the
That
mask
would
or
have been
something, kind of like a
perfect.
little. I don't know, it would have been a great idea because he totally would have done it. He's a guy, the actor who played him is now like a lawyer, but he's still heavily
Yeah.
involved in the Friday the 13th fandom in a way.
Well,
So
he has the cameo in
yeah,
Never Hike Alone.
that's right. You're right. You're right. It's good stuff, man. But
Yeah.
um,
So I look at this one though in a lot of ways, in the regard that you can tell that the people behind the scenes really wanted to make a movie that was a love letter to everything. And I think
yeah,
that to me, that's what ultimately works more about it. It's so light on story.
oh
It's a
yeah,
97-minute movie. it takes 25 minutes to even start because you get a whole prologue leading into the back half of the movie.
Right.
But I think maybe that also is the benefit of the film because I really like those characters up front. I love the opening. I think it's maybe some of the first 25 minutes might be the best 25 minutes of filmmaking in
Mm.
Friday's history. That's a weird thing to say out loud, but like
Didn't
again,
even
you
go,
watch
"What?"
it.
But
Yeah,
it is good.
but you know what, man? Like when you watch it, it gets everything I like about the franchise into like one small
Quick
package.
package, right? Yeah.
Like if I want someone to understand what Friday the 13th is, but I don't want to necessarily show them a full movie, that first 25 minutes where it even recaps what happens with Pamela and then you have it do the quick cut right as
Right.
Jason comes down. Honestly, that tells you everything you need to know about this franchise.
Yeah.
And
Although it
that's
actually adds a
remarkable.
little bit. It adds a little bit to it because this is where we mentioned like one of the things, the key moments we talked about before is Jason's feral behavior, but how Jason is more intelligent in this film. Like, and
Yes.
I don't mean necessarily smart, but he has like, for example, the bear trap. He lays out the bear trap on the kid. Like he never would have laid out a trap like that. I don't think I can't remember a previously episode where he could
No.
have would have like that just took a lot of forethought. Everything else. He's always been one to play with his victims. Like he finds something, he's like, oh, I can use this, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But like to sit there, like
He's
it
the
looks like that's
MacGyver of all slashers.
right, exactly. I do love that aspect of it as well. You're not wrong, really. Honestly, the first 20 minutes is a boiled down version, which is kind of funny that in a film that is a mashup of four films, really, that the first 20 minutes is like a mashup of the entire franchise to a degree. I mean, think of
Right?
like even as you have a kill where he puts the girl in a sleeping bag,
I
sets it up
know.
and over the fire and cooks it. And it's like it's another sleeping bag because sleeping bag deaths are notorious in Friday the 13th history because
Yeah.
they had to have a sleeping bag death, and that's what they give you. They give you one, and it's new and different than the one we had before. So it's
Yeah.
a lot of cool stuff going on.
And you get like, we were joking about it earlier, but one of the things that they really went big on with this, as weird as it sounds, is they really wanted the sex and nudity turned back up
Yeah,
because they felt like the series had dialed down on it so heavily over the
it
last
had.
like four installments, and it had. I mean, it was just true. And so this movie, like, you have so much nudity in the first 25 minutes. And that's not part of why I like it, but it's funny because that's what this franchise was
Well, it's not
for
even just
so
like
long.
nudity, it's like excessive, like basically, like especially the first, it's not just like sex in there. They're having like aggressive, dirty sex. Like, like
Yeah.
it's like we're doing, and there's a wind, like you see the shadow of them like from behind. Is like it's really aggressively kind of like dirty, kind of porn like stuff. And they do that throughout too. That's where this "your tits are stupendous" line comes in because she's
Yeah.
doing this whole thing. The whole thing is about like we're gonna. I think one of the producers, I forget which one mentioned it. Like, yeah, it's exactly what you said. Let's turn the nudity back up. But it almost like they decided to not just turn it back up. They like put it into overdrive to make up for the lost ground and to kind of
Yeah.
almost like, but also in a way to kind of like self-parody it in a way. It's like kind of like,
Yeah.
how far are we gonna go? Like, how far could they go? And
And
like,
that's
we're gonna
why it
go
always
all the
kind of
way.
makes fun of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Some of those lines are
Like,
just funny about it. You're like kind of like you laugh at it, even though it is sexy, but it's still like, what the hell is going on here? It's
yeah, it's
ridiculous.
really almost funny.
Yeah. Mm.
And then you have to sit there and I kind of applaud the effort, as weird as that also sounds, because there is something to be said nowadays about the lack of emotion and allowing people to love and be characters and show any sort of relationships with people in modern media because there's a lot of people online, and I know you've seen the same thing. There's like
Yeah.
this weird puritanical build lately
Yeah.
against sex and nudity in movies.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it feels so backwards to me.
Agreed.
Uh
A lot of that
especially
country
being
going.
a horror fan.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
I will
I've never
say
understood it.
I never understood that either. I think that's some of and it's not even because like it's like I'm turned on or anything. But it's funny to watch. It's just funny like the whole way they do it. They're poking fun at like they're poking fun at itself doing that. Like this is what we used to give you. We're gonna amp it up for you now.
But also, it's a weird sexless sort of narrative, right,
Yeah.
for a lot of
Yeah.
the blockbusters, which is strange because honestly, and this all kind of comes full circle in what we're talking about, but I I tend to put movies on while I work at the bar, and I had Spider-Man on the other day,
Mhm.
like the OG Sam Raimi one. Funny enough,
Right.
we've been talking about Sam Raimi to bring this around, but in that movie, the relationship between Peter and MJ feels so sensual and real at times,
Right.
and, like, who doesn't think about that upside down kiss and in the rain and all of that, right?
Yeah.
That type of stuff is pretty much lost now in
Right.
most superhero films,
Mhm.
and I don't and that's a weird thing, and people keep saying they don't want more of that. They want less of the relationships and they want it to be more sexless, and I will never understand that because I would much rather have something be very sexy and hot and make me feel something because
Yeah.
you want to feel something for the characters in some capacity. And horny teenagers in a Friday the 13th film, that that makes me feel, yay, they're going to be horny and Jason's going to murder them and it's going to make me happy. You
It
need that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the whether or not it was ever intended that way, it's what Friday the 13th became. It became a big staple of the franchise. To have it without it felt a little weird. It felt like why are you messing with success?
Yeah.
To agree, that's exactly the point. Although I will say it's kind of funny that we talk about this, that I'm going to transition into something that I found like a little, not in tasteless is the wrong word. I just think it was kind of stupid. We have that worker who gets the wood chipper or whatever, correct? Like
Yeah.
they put him
Oh
like
god,
his scene,
I know exact the doll.
the doll, and licking first of all, licking the porn mag or whatever it is, and then
Yeah.
like going into the doll. They have this whole sequence where he has this like, I'm gonna take you to Pound Town. All like it's kind of like this. That felt like just a dumb way to do it. Like I didn't like that.
Oh,
But
that was
like this is stupid. This is like I love over the top, and when you're advancing it up, that's like this was like off kilter and amped up, and it's like
yeah.
we didn't really need any of this at all, did we? Really? I,
I
I
would say no, but I got why they were doing it because again, they were also really playing up the dumb redneck characters in the
yeah,
franchise, and
yeah,
that guy is just the dumbest redneck of all time.
yeah. You're not wrong. It just his whole character is kind of like, all right, I don't. It's less of you. I need the better at this point.
Yeah,
But
he's arguably my least favorite thing about the movie, honestly.
yeah, agreed, agreed. I guess they also had introduced the wood chipper earlier on. I guess that's the that's the reason for
Yeah,
doing that eventually.
what yeah, pretty much Chekhov's wood chipper.
Exactly.
Because that's what it is. I mean, you really make it a point that this wood chipper is here. You got to use the wood chipper at some point then.
Absolutely. That's what it
Which
is.
also, like the whole ending kind of being in a barn is very Friday Part 5.
Yeah.
Um, again, it kind of takes things from everything, right?
Yeah. Everything that it does has some basis in a previous film. I mean, I think I like the fact that the idea is we get from the matchup style, we got the beginnings of the end of Friday the 13th Part 1. We actually get Baghead Jason for a little bit.
Who I love.
Well, you love and I've never loved, and that's fine. We'll differ about that. But it transitions into Mass Jason. I honestly feel like the filmmakers felt like I do, but they wanted to give homage to Bag Jason. So,
Yeah.
like, we got to have Jason. Not only do we have to skip the first one, but we need Jason. We need to skip the second one because we need Jason in his mask because that's the iconic Jason that people need. But they do at least find time to give him the respect that Baghead Jason deserves, I guess, and give him a little bit of a run as Baghead Jason.
And I'll say this right now. This is the movie that makes me love Baghead Jason the most.
Okay, that's fair. I didn't mind him as much, mainly because it's short. I think that's part of
Yeah.
the issue. Like it's kind of a quick brag at Jason, and when he gets the mask, it's over. Like, okay, I don't mind it as much.
Well, and
Instead of
also
doing the
again,
entire
I think
film.
it's the, Derek Mears being Derek Mears and awesome. And again, the opening is just so astounding.
Yeah,
Like, at least in my opinion, like, dude, he's scary in it. It's
uh,
so good. It just makes me so happy.
absolutely, absolutely.
What is your favorite kill in the movie? I'm curious now because there's quite a few very good kills in this.
There are, and some of them are simple and good, and some of them are extensive and good. Like, I almost want to go back to the sleeping bag one because it was such a fun one. Although it's kind of funny how like she's screaming, screaming, screaming. All of a sudden, she's like, "There's no like." It just all of a sudden she's dead. It's like
Yeah.
dead. It's like weird in that way. But I think one of my favorite ones is it showcases Jason is a like wooded Olympics champion.
Yes, correct.
He is Hawkeye. He is,
Yes, correct.
and it's the axe throw.
Yes,
Like
my boy.
two-handed
Ah,
axe. I'm like right in the back. I'm like, oh,
oh, it's so good. It's so good.
so good, so good at that dude. I love that. Although I will say it's kind of funny how. Did you notice how quickly Jason got to the roof after that?
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, when he becomes Batman, Jason.
He kills him. It kills the guy, and all of a sudden, like you go in and you go back out. Like it seems like it's like 2 seconds later, and you're already on the roof. And like and I never heard anything. And it's like, what the hell just happened? How did that
And he's
happen?
just watching them, by the
Are you
way.
supernatural, Jason? At this point, be honest. Come on.
Kind of feels that way, to be fair.
What about you? What's your favorite kill? Same one.
So you stole mine,
Okay, fair
honestly.
enough.
But I'll say one of the kills I really love is the stuff involving Bree because
Mm.
she just keeps being re-killed after every single time. Like they just mutilate that poor girl, and not in a like bad, mean sort of way, but
No,
like
it's
the
humorous.
fact that she gets killed and then thrown out a window, gets shot, like all these things happen to her, and you just feel bad because she's already dead, but it's just the body keeps being used by Jason to like really ring home how evil and just mean he is. Just the meanest son of a bitch who ever lived.
Yeah.
Although Trent getting put on the back of the truck,
Yes, I was going to put that. I was
tow
going to name
truck.
that too.
Oh god, it's so good. And
Like the
again,
death
you
is
can just
fine,
tell.
right?
Yeah.
The death is fine itself, but then like when he puts him on the truck as it's driving away, that's like the chef's kiss of
Yeah.
the whole thing. And that guy got home. That guy who was like, at least oxygen. He gets home and has like boy stuck to his van, stuck to his pickup truck. I mean, that's just hilarious.
Imagine all the questions you have to answer after that.
Yeah, exactly. Like what the fuck? Another thing I actually mentioned too. Well, let me first off to go back to Brie. One of my favorite parts of the movie. One of my favorite parts of the movie is Trent shoots through the door. He shoves open
Oh,
the
yeah.
door,
Oh, yeah.
runs in, he's like, and close it. He's killed Brie. Let's go. You just shot her. You don't even know how she died. How she died. But that's funny. But mentioning the guy with Trent on the truck, another thing that we don't even think about. I mentioned Hawkeye. So Dick Cassavetes gets shot with a bow and
Yep.
arrow through the head. Good, great, perfect shot. And the boat just goes. So
Yep.
where did that boat end up? And like, did it crash and landed? Like, so no one noticed it. Like, did just I hope did it hit an abandoned campsite? Maybe I don't hoping so. Not a very big deal, but I think in my head I'm kind of like, so
I
no one
assume it
noticed his
just
boat.
marooned itself.
That's that it is. It just
Either that or Jason takes it home. I mean,
maybe
to be fair, he ends up, destroying all his kayaks, so he probably needs a boat for half a second.
All right, somebody.
But
You know what would be best? Maybe he went to that guy's house. So the guy comes with the pickup, has the guy at his back of his thing, goes out
there
to
it is.
his back, and he sees Dick
Yeah.
Cassavetes with an arrow through his head.
I
I swear to God, I had nothing to do with this, but
I just wish that this movie was more liked overall. And I do get why people don't gel with it. And I know that like for Friday Purist, because it feels like it's kind of remaking the first four, that they have such a hard time accepting it that way and accepting something so different with the character in a lot of capacity. And yeah, the characters aren't always the most interesting, but I think it all gets made up for in the fact that the Jason in this movie is so damn good and that you have such a eclectically interesting cast overall. They're all just the worst characters pretty much imaginable, and they're not that interesting, but they're memorable in
yeah,
some capacity, as weird as that sounds also. Like,
yeah,
I don't think that they're great characters by any stretch,
right.
but they're memorable because all of their deaths are fun and there's
Yeah,
some really cheesy bad dialogue from all of them in the best ways, and it just does at times feel a little CW light, and that's
yeah,
because it's full of CW actors.
yeah.
And there's not that's not to be derogatory, like,
No,
that stuff is on TV for a long time, and people watch all that stuff for a long time for a reason. People love Supernatural and The
oh, big,
Flash and
big
Veronica
supernatural.
Mars, I get it. I mean, look, you're watching a podcast with two of the biggest fans of Veronica Mars of all time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, like, I it is not lost on me why we all like that stuff.
Yeah.
But in that being said, I do think that there is a portion of people who look at that movie from when it came out. Now, granted, nowadays it probably matters less if you're discovering it. You have no real acknowledgement the
Right.
same way we did of those shows all being on at the same time that this
Right.
show was in theaters or was going to be,
Right.
but there is something to be said about a bunch of very recognizable young actors being in this one in a way that is so interesting that Kevin Bacon is in the original,
Yes,
or that
that's a good
Corey
way to put it.
Feldman is in the fourth one, or
Which
Crispin
that's
Glover is in the sixth one,
right.
or the fourth one rather. But like
Right.
the point being, this does end up following that trend in a
Yeah.
weird way of kind of recognizable actors being put into this. And it's funny because this is not the only remake starring one of the stars from Supernatural,
Yep.
because Jensen would end up being in My Bloody Valentine right around the
That's
same
right.
time.
That's right. I
So
remember that.
they were really all kind of leaning in on that horror thing while everything was happening, for better or worse, again, depending on how you want to look at it. But I contend and will probably say until the end of time that, as far as I am concerned, in the world of people touching franchises and remaking things that maybe don't necessarily need to be remade, but are reinventing it in a way anyway,
Mhm.
Friday the 13th comes out very close to the top of that heap of things that has been made, because it's made by people who genuinely love this property.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Um, you know what I gotta ask you? We haven't talked about him at
Yeah.
all. I wanna give credit to where credit's due. Aaron Wu, I think is it, who plays Chewie?
Oh, yeah.
We haven't talked about him at all. Uh,
He's great. I love that guy.
and Aaron Yu, sorry, Aaron Yu, that's who it is. I had to look that up.
From,
What
of
a
course, everyone's favorite other remake, by the way, not to cut you off, Disturbia, the remake of Rear Window
right,
starring Shia LaBeouf.
right. That's right. What a great job he did as well, and even more so, I really got to push that Crystal Lake Memories doc. I know I
God,
love
it's so
watching
good.
those. You get such insight behind what's going on in interviews, and you never even know. But Derek Mears told a story about Chewie, where I guess he got sick on set. Like he got
Yeah, he had to
taken
have his
away to the
appendix removed.
hospital, appendix removed. He comes back with his stomach all stapled up, and he's like, "Yeah, throw me around, throw me around." And Derek Pierce is like, I don't know if we should." And of course, the producer's like, "Well, if we're gonna get the shot of his staple, if the staple bursts out, because his stomach starts coming out, we'll have it on film at least." I'm like,
God,
Jesus
I love
Christ,
that.
let's get the stuff going.
It's so fucked up, but it's so right in how
On
you lean
point.
on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's like, great. And then they give the story when Jason's gets him through the jaw, he starts like choking on it, and Derek Mears was worried. He's like, "Oh, are you okay? Okay." Like, yeah, I was trying to inhale it and get to come out my sinuses because it would look really cool. It's like, God, that's a lot of like commitment to the bit there, and I'm all here for it.
Well, and he even says, he was like, "Dude, you are too committed. Like, please relax." Like, he could tell that dude was a little into it, you
I love
know?
that. I love it
But
for that reason.
I
It's
love
like
it
I
because
give
I
credit
think
where
it
credit's due.
also shows how much, once again, when you look at some of this stuff, right?
Right.
You want it to be done by people who care, and boy, does he care.
Does
He
he care?
tried super hard to really amp up his character's death and do like different things with it, and that's pretty awesome, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely is. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there specifically because that is fucking great. That is fucking great.
That was one of my favorite stories, honestly,
Yeah,
in it, just because it makes me laugh. I
yeah,
think it's such a little thing, but again, you can really tell that the people who were involved in this really ended up being people who actually liked all this in some
mm,
capacity. Because you listen to any of them talk. I can't recommend this doc enough, you guys.
yeah.
It's so good. You got to set aside 6 hours of your time, but because it goes through literally every one of the movies, but it's totally worth it.
Or watch it in chunks. Watch the movie, then watch the chunk whenever you have a chance to do it. It's a good
Yeah,
way to do it,
because it's usually
honestly.
about 20 to 30 minutes per movie.
Right.
Generally,
So
is
it becomes
about.
very
Uh,
doable that way.
yeah. I was gonna say, in all of that, you can tell everyone who came back to talk about it, and I gotta say, I'm gonna point it out anyway
Okay,
because
we
I
had a
talked about it
conversation
earlier.
off air. That's right. Yeah.
It's a little weird to me that Jared Padalecki is not involved in this at any capacity.
At all.
I know it at all. Like, they have almost everyone from every one of these movies come back. Like, I can't think of any of the other segments in this where a main actor, like the lead role, is not interviewed even at least a little bit.
Right, right.
And
I
yet, for some reason, Padalecki is just not
Yeah.
here at all.
As a channel, I wanna put forth the idea, at least the statement. We don't know why. The chance it could be a schedule thing. We don't wanna say we're starting rumors. We don't know any, facts at all.
I
We
have my
just
feelings.
we just know that he is not in the only thing we know is the only thing we know for a fact that he's not in the documentary. Um, and it does seem a little strange. It would be honest, and I'm hoping it's not because Jared is ashamed of his time in Friday the 13th. However, maybe he is. I've never
Yeah,
heard him talk about it at all, to be honest with you. So that's also kind of
it
telling.
yeah. Well, and you know what's funny about that? Do you know where Jason was supposed to appear before this movie? Before this happened?
No,
He he was gonna be in Supernatural. They
was he
were gonna
really?
do an episode set at Crystal Lake. Now, you can
Really?
look this up. This is like a real thing. They had gotten
Did I
super
not know
far
that?
into developing one of these, and eventually they were told they couldn't do it because of the rights. But Jason was originally supposed to appear in an episode of Supernatural. And so
Wow.
I wonder if there's a part of that too, that's how he ended up in this, was that they had
Oh,
originally jockeyed to do that,
huh.
or maybe it was after this, but I know he was going to be in it at one point. So there's just this very fascinating story of the them being interlocked in that. But this doc, you can tell as you watch it how much fun everyone was having. And my
Yeah,
favorite thing though was them talking about Derek Mears, because
yeah.
everyone in the cast who was involved with Derek Mears was like, he made it fun. Like he was having the world's best time, and he wanted us to be having fun.
And he said there was such a difference between he wanted how like his character and his real life personality. They
Yeah,
all wanted to have beer with him. They all wanted to be. They all felt safe for him. They all felt like it was. It's kind of funny how it's like such a difference between because Kane Hodder was very
yeah,
specific about wanting to make sure that they stayed away from each other. Like he wanted to be the bad guy. He wanted to have them be scared of him,
yeah.
and to make it work. I don't. I could either approach works as long as everybody's fine. I mean, I never heard anybody say a bad thing about Kane Hodder either, or like that.
No.
Uh, but Derek is definitely a different kind of individual for sure. He is funny. He is funny as heck. Did you
Once
watch
again,
the
if
credits?
anyone can get Derek Mears on our podcast so we can have
Love it.
beers and talk with him,
I love
please
that.
help us. Help us.
Did you watch the credits of the doc, which is like
Oh yeah.
all the characters, all the actors saying their famous lines or whatever?
Yeah.
And it
It's
keeps coming
so
back
good.
to Derek Beers, like,
Just sitting there staring. Yeah.
and I was probably like,
I just love Derek Mears so much, dude.
he
He
buys
is
into it so much. So good.
genuinely maybe one of the coolest horror icons that people don't realize is a thing. And
Yeah.
it's funny because like I think back to all the things I've ever seen him in, and you just go, yeah, he's just so good. Like
So good.
just fun. And it was funny because when I was watching the doc downstairs, MJ was sitting next to me and watching it, and we were just kind of talking and having fun with it. And she was like, "He actually seems super cool." And I was like, "I know, right? Like, I just want to hang out with this guy." And
Yes.
I was like, "The best thing about him is that because he's such a different looking dude, it's made him so cool to like pop up and put him in things because he looks good under makeup and stuff too."
Oh yeah. Oh, he really does. Yeah, he's got that kind of face, which is not it's a very unique looking face. And it's not we're not saying he's ugly or anything like that. He's just got a very
No, no, just
unique
very
face.
unique. Yeah,
Um, but it's not something that comes across as like your typical front leading man kind of looks or whatever. But it does seem to work really well for makeup. It does seem to work really well for having like weird prosthetics on and cuts and demonizing things and longer. Also, can get the hair thrown on like the extended wild man hair that we have. Jason has hair again, a little bit anyway. Yeah, no, but it's true. It's true, and I think if you add Derek Mears to your project, you're adding someone who's 100% gonna do his thing for you.
he
Um,
also deserves so much better as Swamp Thing. Fuck
mm,
WB for what they did to that TV show. He was
mm.
so goddamn good.
I actually have never watched Swamp Thing. I should at some point for him alone. I almost 100%
Well,
would.
and it's James Wan.
That's right. It is James Wan, isn't it? I
Yeah.
should. I
I
should.
mean, you should because it's legitimately very good. It's 10 episodes. It's super easy to watch. You had Gary Dauberman, Len Wiseman, and James Wan all involved. So, like, it's actually got a pretty good pedigree. Wiseman obviously did the pilot,
Right.
but it's God, we got robbed.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do at this point?
Be mad about it though? I'm
Like
allowed to be mad about it. Derek Mears deserved better, goddammit.
maybe we'll talk. We'll see. Maybe he's still young enough to he can be Jason in the Crystal Lake series.
That's my hope, honestly. We were talking about this the other night because we were texting back and forth about the movie, and the thing that made me the happiest though, like you were like, this conversation will be interesting, and it went exactly the way I anticipated.
Same.
Both of us being like, it's really fun for the most part. It's definitely got its issues, but there's so much love put into it that I can look past most of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was really happy when you were like, I finally got where you were coming from about Mears. And that just made me feel so good because that was one of those things where I was like, you're seeing the thing that I've been seeing this whole time.
Right. I will
Because
admit
I will preach that forever.
the first time I saw this film, one of the problems I had is I was one of those who had selective memory, and the fact that Jason was running threw me off. I was like, I didn't like that at first because that wasn't Jason to me. I'm like, oh,
Right.
you're changing Jason like that. I kind of like, I feel, and it was just, it's a stupid thing when it comes down to it because like you're changing one aspect of the characters and me, like this is a remake. Things are going to be have some slight differences. But I had that kind of stupid fanboy thing in my heart for a few moments. I'm not going to lie. But then when I got through that, I'm like, I'm happy they did it that way. It's my favorite, one of my favorite things about the Jason, this Jason now, Derek Mears' Jason, is that he runs and he's savage. It's such a different version. So I did. It took me a little bit to get to him. I didn't hate his performance before, but I was like, this isn't my Jason. I also admit to having some loyalty to Kane Hodder.
Oh, for sure. I get it.
And also because I was so frustrated that Kane Hodder wasn't in Freddy vs. Jason. So it's still having that lingering. Not only was he not in Freddy vs. Jason, and now they replaced him with this, I'm like, fuck this guy. Kane Hodder's my boy. In a way, I had that in my heart to begin with, which is not a good way to be. It's not. But, we're all human. We have our things. But I'm just glad that now when I watch this, I can severely go look at Derek Mears. Job well done. Jason, well done. Good work. Good work, my friend.
It makes me happy that you're coming around, because no, I really mean that. It feels good to see people like feeling this way.
No, it's great. It's great. So, all right, you want to rank these bad boys, and we'll finish out the Friday the 13th series
I
proper.
think we should do that. Yeah.
All right, or do you want to do Jason's first?
I mean, you know where this is going to stand. It doesn't matter.
I'll do it. Let's do Jason's first. Just so we know, you had from worst, least favorite to favorite was part 1, then Jason Goes to Hell, then Freddy vs. Jason, then part 2, then part 3, then part 6, then part 8, then part 4, then part 7, and then Jason X. And so are you doing what I think you're doing?
I absolutely am. Let's turn this bitch up to 11 and put him at the number 1 spot because we are going all the way for Derek Mears. Damn, yes.
Derek Mears, the favorite of Jason of PJ Campbell. That's fine. For me, at
least it's honest.
It's absolutely honest. We had part 1 was my least favorite as well. Obviously, it's both of our least favorites because it's just the kid appears at the end. I had part 2 then. I had Jason Goes to Hell next, saved by Kane Hodder's absolute monster appearance at the very end. Part 4, after that, part 3, part 8, Freddy vs. Jason. So I gave Ken Kersniger a lot more credit despite me being pissed at him taking over Kane Hodder. Then part 6, then Jason X. My favorite still been Kane Hodder in New Blood in part 7. I am going to put 2009 at the number 3 slot, just under Jason X. I think I still prefer Jason X and then part 7, New Blood. But Derek, I think it's like it's the difference between I have that nostalgia for the original, even if the new thing is pretty good too.
You know what? I think that's growth for you.
Yeah.
I could be mad about it, but I like seeing my friend grow as a human being and finally seeing the light. So, you know what, man? I'm going to allow it.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, hey, to be completely
honest. Look
at
me being an adult.
Look at that. Both of us being adults. What's going on here? That's so strange of us.
I went on vacation. That's what happened.
You calmed
down.
I
went on vacation. I calmed down. Disney brought me back down to being,
Good for you. Good for you. I mean, completely honestly, but anybody the top 5, top 6 are all great Jasons, great fun
well,
Jasons.
that's the thing, right?
These are all like you're all talking about degrees at this point. All right, then let's move to the movies. This is where I'm interested to see where this slots in. At this point, we have you gave Friday the 13th, the original, a 6.5, which we always do things out of 11 here on PLD Projects. By the way, we turn things up to 11. So, on a scale of 1 to 11, you gave the original 6.5. I gave it a 6. You gave part 2 an 8.5. I gave it a 7. I almost want to revisit that one. I feel like I did that one a little dirty, maybe, but we'll see. Part 3, you gave a 7. I also gave a 7. Part 4, you gave a 10. I gave it 9.5. Part 5, you gave a 6. I gave it a 5.5. Part 6, you gave it a perfect 11. I gave it a perfect 11. Part 7, you gave it a 9.5. I gave it another perfect 11. Nostalgia was strong on this one for me.
That's fair.
Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, you gave it a 4. I gave it a 3.
Boy, we are just, it's so funny hearing all this, and it's just how on point we always are.
Agree. I mean, we usually are very close and agree. We never have a film that we're that far off on. Like, I feel like there's only been 1 or 2 that we've been like off by even more than like 2 points or something like that. Jason Goes to Hell. We had just basically swapped part 8. You gave this one a 3. I gave it a 4.5. Jason X, you gave it a perfect 11. I gave it a solid 10. Freddy vs. Jason, you gave it 8. I gave it a solid 10. Friday the 13th, 2009. Where do we go here?
We get a bit of sky. For everything I've said throughout, I don't think it's any surprise that I really enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
It's got fantastic kills. It's got insufferably awful characters that I love seeing nothing more than for them to die. It's got the world's best Jason for me. It's got a great soundtrack to boot.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous to look at. It feels like a real movie. It feels like the first time in a long time that a Friday movie actually had money. And I know that sounds weird, but like looking at it, it looks beautiful.
Yeah. Especially compared to like Jason X, for example.
Yeah. And even Jason Goes to Hell. Like, we talked about it actually. If you go back and listen to all these, I always talk about how you can watch the change of budgets every little time where it starts to look more polished or more clean.
Right.
Talk about looking as polished and clean as you can get. That's this movie. Yeah. And with all that being said, I think I'm going to give this guy a solid 10.
Solid 10. Woo. All right. That's fair. It's funny you bring up the music real quick. I actually had a note that I didn't mention. When I heard Sish and Christian playing.
Oh my God, how good.
Woo. I mean, this showcases a lot. Friday the 13th is getting a real song. Like, that's the budget thing too. They got a real music in there as well. It's like,
and once again, talk about how we said it was very timeless. They wanted to set it in the 80s. They were told no, but there's nothing overtly in the movie that says it wouldn't have to be or couldn't be either.
Yeah.
And so even having Sister Christian play like Motorin, what's your price for fight? Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we are a little different. You give us a 10. It's a little high for me. Actually, I am giving it a 7.5.
You're strong with this one.
I do, but that's actually that sounds worse than it is. I do really enjoy it. I just look at the negative side of things. I can't score it higher. Like enjoyment, I put it up there higher. As far as an overall film goes, I gotta give it like I can look at. I'm looking at the. I can't put it that much higher than Friday the 13th Part 2 or 3. I can't put it over the final chapter, which I have as a 9.5, for example. When it comes,
I gave it a perfect. Since I gave that one such a high score, I could only go down from here, so it's okay.
So you evened it out. You said basically 4 and 2009 are on the same level. That's what basically you said, as this goes, which is fine. It's just fine.
What? I will take it because I do genuinely think that those are outside of Part 6. Those are easily for me the best Friday movies. Like if we're talking about movies, again, this movie has the best Friday film of all time in 30 minutes. If you want someone to know what this franchise is, this movie is that movie. And so I think that alone speaks volumes to what this means as a franchise as a whole and what this movie is. So I think that's why I really stump for it so hard and really I truly, truly believe that this is what this franchise can and should be. So yeah,
I want to go back, and I have this right to do so. I am bumping up Friday the 13th Part 2 to an 8,
I love it.
um, because I really feel I did it a little bit dirty. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back and do that. I feel like we can do that retroactively, make sure that sometimes
Yeah,
when you
we've
live to
done it
see the whole
before.
franchise as a whole, you kind of go back and like, yeah, I really should have given that a little bit more credit, or credits too. So Baghead Jason, you get a little bit more love for me from that. Um, so that
Yay, more Baghead Jason love.
so that means for me, my final tally as far as the proper film versions of Jason go, my average score for the Friday the 13th films is a 6.6 out of
That
11.
honestly sounds just about right.
Yours is a 6.75.
Oh my god, look at us, just that lockstep. And again, really, at the end of the day, that pretty much tracks for what I would feel like this franchise is.
I fully agree. It's a out of 11, a 6.5 around there. That's it. It's right in the middle because there's some really good ones. There's some really not so good moments. So we'll hit you right in the middle.
God, that is incredible, honestly.
It's hard to
It
imagine.
okay, I gotta say, I know that people give us shit all the time about being like, we've had people who are like, it's way more fun when you guys don't get along and you yell at each other and you're talking about things, which I don't necessarily agree. I don't like when that happens. It's not fun for me. I
No,
don't like arguing with you. I don't.
I
And
don't like arguing with you, and I don't like bashing movies. I had a
yeah,
conversation actually with Lego last night as well because we did an episode of review last night, recorded it. Yeah, recorded yesterday. We both don't like. We are because of the nature of the show. We do franchises, and there's no way you're going to love every installment of a franchise. So that's where it comes from. But if I had my choice, I would only cover movies that I really love.
yeah,
But I understand the value of covering the franchise as a whole. I understand that. I do. And I
which is
wouldn't
why we
change
do
that.
it.
Right, exactly. But at the end of the day, again, I hate bashing films. I'm like, oh, I'd much rather talk about the things I love than talk about the things I hate. And I always try to give that value out. I always try to say, hey, this might be one of someone's favorite movie out there. And I'm glad it is your favorite movie. I'm glad you love it. So I
Yeah.
don't want to break any hearts out there. But at the same time, yeah, I don't like arguing with you either at that point. Like sure we have our fun, like ball busting kind of things we always
Yeah,
do.
because that's who we are.
That's who we are, exactly. At the end of the day, we know who we are. We know we don't ever take anything too seriously or too far. Um, but yeah, I'd much rather gush with you than
Yeah,
than
and I
fight you.
just love how we look at this and it's like, look how in lockstep we very frequently are with all this.
Yeah,
Like, we're this is why I like doing this with you because you and I see the value of a lot of this and we're so very similar a lot of the time that it's just kind of fun to
yeah,
be this happy. Like again, if we're both at the 6.5 range of this franchise as a whole,
right.
that's pretty great.
Yeah, that is pretty great overall. So, we looked at together. We've done a lot of these franchises together now. We're never very far off with each other.
I mean, what
I'm
what
here
was
for it.
where was The Conjuring for us?
The Conjuring, I think, had the one time that we were probably further. I have all the things here in front of us. Scream, I'll go right through here. Scream, I had an average of an 8. You had an average of an 8.4.
See?
Yeah. Although, yeah, I'll talk about it. All right. So, Conjuring, I had an average of 6.89. You had an average of 7.22.
Not bad
That's the overall franchise. I know we had the one big difference of opinion
on
for
Annabelle
on
creation.
Annabelle creation it was, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
That was still only 2 points difference after the end of the day. You had an 8 and I had a 6. That's how so it wasn't that bad. Lord of the Rings, we all gave 11s. So Halloween, I gave a 6.5. You had a 6.89. So so basically 6.9.
Yeah.
Not much different. Shining, we
We're
only had
just
the two. Yeah.
yeah, very lockstep here.
Final Destination, 6.4 for me, 6.7 for you. Lethal Weapon, 9.1 for me, 9.5 for you. Indie, 10.4 for me, 10.7 for you.
We are what we are, man.
I know I can't argue it at this point. What are you
And
gonna do?
look, so with all that said, as we're doing airing all this, I want to thank you guys because we've been going so hard into so much of this over the last 2 years. And I'm very excited that we're doing the John Wick movies after we finish the Friday franchise with the Never Hike Alones, because it'll be good to break it up a little bit like we did with
Yeah,
Lethal Weapon and Indy, like doing a little less just horror. We're very good at trying to make sure we do that. But in doing all this, we've had a lot of people who have come through, who have watched the videos, who have listened, on the podcast feeds. At one point, we were in the top podcast of the year in
right.
entertainment on
Right.
Spotify. We were having a really nice time. It was super fun, and I really appreciate all your guys' support,
Yeah.
because without you guys, we don't. I mean, we'd probably still do this. To be fair, we'd probably just sit on a screen and do the same thing we do every time, which is
Screaming to the
hanging
void.
out and talking about movies, because that's who we are. That's what we do.
Right.
But I love that people keep coming back to listen to us. And I now love that in putting all this out there, I can always point to where my opinions have shifted and changed. Or if you want to hear how I feel about a thing, like, do you know how many times I've used our Dial of Destiny review or our Crystal Skull review to be like, here, please listen to the thing where we recap this, because I would like you to know why I think people get this movie fundamentally wrong. Here's
Right.
our thing. Like,
Right.
this is my thesis on this. And that's been really fun. And I think with the franchise thing overall, you're right. There's so much merit to this. Even when the movies aren't great, there's a lot to like.
Absolutely. And we have to get through the bad to get to the good, and I'm willing to do that. I do want to point out real quick as an aside, I was noticing on my spreadsheet, in case you were wondering, I don't think we ever really explained this. We both didn't rank the Jason from part five because it's not Jason. So we
Yeah.
didn't have part five amongst that, as it were. We were ranking our favorite Jasons. That's not Jason. That's the only reason why we did that. So I'm like, why don't they match up? I have one missing. I'm like, oh, because we didn't do five. That's why. So just to throw it out there. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree with you 100% about things. I think I have to thank our audience as well. We've had a great, a lot of people talk to me about it. Every once in a while, they'll say, we'll bring up something we mentioned. And they might like click while we fight, but they also like us supporting. We kind of have this thing where we, like you said, with Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny, where we will go to bat for movies that are probably
Much maligned.
unfairly maligned. Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even say unfairly because it's subjective. But at the same time, it's films that are not well liked that we have found great appreciation for. And a lot of times after we get those, somebody else will say, well, you know what? I don't love it that much more, but I get it. And that's the biggest compliment I can get. I
Yeah.
don't need you to love it. I don't need you to turn your opinion around completely on it. But as long as you understand where we're coming from and you see that there is some genuine thought there, then that's fine by me. That makes me happy that you've come that far at least. So
Yeah. Anytime I get a message that someone has gone back and rewatched something because they listened to us talk about it
yes,
and then they decide to watch it, has always been very like, that is why I still do this. And
yeah,
it's why I enjoy it, because the truth of the matter is I really don't do a lot of this anymore. I really started to take a stand of, I was just trying to enjoy things and I wasn't going to force myself to watch stuff if I didn't want to. You know
right,
what I mean? Like, because again, people don't necessarily realize how much I was watching all the time when we were involved in the show,
right,
that a lot of it I was watching because I had to, and
right.
it really could be draining
It
when
kills the
you were
enjoyment.
forced. Yeah, it stops being fun.
Right,
And in doing this with you and in doing what we do, I have found a love and appreciation again for movies that I hadn't had in a long time, in a way that gets me to feel like this is why movies matter. Even
right.
even a bad Friday the 13th movie does matter in some capacity, because
Absolutely.
I'm enjoying talking about it in some capacity with you, even if it makes me mad.
Same.
Um,
Agreed. Agreed.
yeah, and so I think the thing I have taken away over the last 2 years of us doing this is that I feel beyond lucky that I get to do this with someone who I get to hang out with all the time, who I consider the closest thing I have to a living, breathing relative that is, like a brother, because I
Right.
don't have any siblings. I am an
Right.
only child.
Right.
And so for me to have that and share this with you, and then share our love and our passion for this stuff with a bigger audience, is really special. And I just, I don't wax poetic on here a ton about this stuff, but I just think with where we're coming around to, because we're going to be just past our 2-year mark soon,
Yeah.
like we have not given up this over the last 2 years. and it could have been easy to. We're both very busy. We've
Oh, yeah.
taken time off when we've needed a break, or we've been overwhelmed and we just needed to walk away. But we've never, and we will never, as long as I am concerned,
Yeah.
put a nail in this because it's way too much fun. We get to talk all the time about movies. I get to hang out with one of my favorite people in the
Yeah.
entire world, and you guys enjoy it. So, you know
Uh,
what? Kudos to you. Now hit
just
the
you.
Patreon link.
There you go. Yeah, no, I just want to add real quick. I agree because like you're my I think you're probably my best friend in the world at this point. At
Yeah.
this point, but we obviously you live in Arizona, I live in New York,
Fuck you, Jeff.
and it's so yeah, and it's so easy to let us. It could be so easy to let that connection fade because we are only online and we only text, and our texts sometimes have gotten a little shorter than recently. But so we always have this to come back to. I look forward to like at least worst comes worst, I get to hang out with my brother for 2 hours
Exactly.
talking movies. That's what I love doing. So
Me
well, I'll do that.
too.
So I'll do that for as far as I'm concerned. This is going nowhere. This is gonna stay. We're gonna stick together for a lot. This is gonna be a great time. We have so many franchises to get through too. So many ones.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we
Including
watch stuff.
ones that involve Littlest Reichs
Yeah,
and
that we're gonna
Tiny
stay
Devil
together.
Puppet.
We're gonna have to stay together a long time before we get to that one. So maybe after
Damn,
continue
I
this
keep
podcast,
trying, man.
maybe continue this in the afterlife. We'll see.
I mean, look, man,
We'll
if
find
I get
out.
to talk about the Puppet Master in the afterlife, I think we're doing all right.
It's worth it. There you go. But yeah, if this is your first time here, hit that like it, that subscribe. You can join the Patreon, like you said, patreon.com/PLD Projects. We have a bunch of people there doing some extra stuff behind the scenes. We have Austin Goodell, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman. Could not do this without you guys. I really do appreciate you keeping the lights on. We are in the midst of doing something kind of cool, a slow burn kind of thing. I mentioned this on the channel before. Right now, if you were listening on the audio feed, you were probably, depending on when this, unless you're listening years from now, a couple of years from now, or a couple of months from now, maybe, I don't even know. You're listening on the PLD Projects feed. Now, what is happening is the PLD Projects houses a lot of different shows. We have Two Mediocre White Dudes on film. We have Review, what they mentioned, show I have with Lego. We talk about the franchise V. I have that Crown Jewels where I talk about Queen. I have
Big Blue Box.
Big Blue Boxes come. That's right. Or you're having that come back when Doctor Who comes back. I have Holy Snokes with Manny Gunner's Star Wars podcast. There's a lot of that's a big mashup of stuff into one feed. So after talking with Brad Gilmore of Gilmore Media, who is we are under the Gilmore Media banner, we are splitting ourselves up into multiple feeds because I don't have to pay for multiple feeds. So I might as well put all the podcasts in one feed. So if you are just a review person, you will have your own feed to just don't have to worry about listening to anything else. If you're Two Mediocre White Dudes on film, guess what? You're actually the lucky one. You get to stay right here because eventually everything's going to have its own feed, and this PLD Projects feed is just going to morph and close into the Two Mediocre White Dudes on film. So you don't have to leave anywhere for us. You're going to stick around right here. You'll always find Two Mediocre
We
White
love
Dudes
you
on
for
film.
it, too. You're
And
trapped with us, baby. You're trapped.
And actually, we'll probably end up keeping Big Blue Box. I don't think I'll give Big Blue Box its own feed. I'll probably just keep it here because it's kind of like it's us. It's you and me together. So it makes sense to, at least for now.
And it's just us talking about Doctor Who, so it's pretty much the same thing.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's actually, I almost thought we were going to go a whole podcast without mentioning Doctor Who. We almost did it. Didn't quite get it done. But that's
okay. It is so funny. I tried so hard not to vamp at the beginning and get into our. I know. And now here we are on the back half, just vamping and talking again.
Okay.
And doing our thing. It's okay. But also, hey guys, there's some really good new Doctor Who audio dramas out there, and I should really push those for you guys to go listen to. Big Finish has been killing it lately. Their new 11th Doctor box set was pretty fucking spectacular.
I'll let you have that. So, all right, guys. Next, or 2 weeks from now, rather, we'll be doing the first of the two of Never Hike Alone. So check those out. You can find them on YouTube. So if you want to watch those before you check us out, go ahead and make sure you do so. You definitely can't do, but you can't do worse. You can do a lot worse in the fan film community and films community in general. In fact, we've hid no bones that we think that these guys, if we were given a chance to make an actual official for the studio Friday the 13th film, you could make a hell of a lot of a worse choice. So we look forward to it.
I am so excited because if you have never seen these movies, I'm really excited to bring them to you in this capacity. I mean, we have never been quiet about our love for this franchise, and I have not been quiet about my love for these two movies in particular. The second one actually came out while you were visiting, which was super cool. So we got to watch it together. And I remember that while we were watching it, my girlfriend was upstairs because she didn't want to watch it with us. And I remember her coming down after, and she was like, I could hear your guys' reactions. You were losing your minds. And we were like, we just saw the coolest movie we had waited so long to kind of see. But I love the Womp Stomp guys.
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
so happy with Never Hike Alone and Never Hike Alone 2. Um, so the way we're gonna do it, and I'll just tell you now because I want you guys to watch it before you listen to it. If you've not seen it, this is super easy to find. Go to YouTube. They have it on YouTube. It's for free. You're gonna watch Never Hike Alone, the Ghost Cut, and Never Hike Alone 2.
Okay.
They made the Ghost Cut of Never Hike Alone after they had done the prequel called Never Hike Alone in the Snow.
Right.
They took that and the original Never Hike Alone and combined it into one movie. And so that's how we're gonna cover it is as the Ghost Cut. Because to
So
me, that is the best version of it because it becomes a real 80-minute movie.
absolutely. And it's funny because you're going to mention that you're hearing, if you're watching review, this is going to come out, this episode comes out today. This is Tuesday, 27th. Review comes out on Thursday. And I actually talked about that with Lego, and Lego was asking about, what is it, the third view or is it the third one? I'm like, well, there are three of them, I think, but they got combined. I don't have it. Like
Yeah.
PJ knows it better how to explain exactly how it went down. But either way, two films to watch. Next week is Never Hike Alone. The first one, we'll watch that and we'll go through that. And yeah, I can't wait for it, my friend. So where can the folks find you?
You guys can find me on all the social platforms at PJ Campbell. I'm always around. I've said it before. I've kind of set myself to private for right now because I'm trying to keep my life, but also talk with you guys. So if you come here from the podcast and you aren't following me on social, just hit the follow thing. You know, you can even tweet at me, hey, was listening to the podcast, decided to follow you. It just helps me make sure that I know who's in my bubble because I'm living my life again in a very me sort of way. And I like being able to internalize that, but I also want you guys to still see my nonsense on Twitter.
Fair
So,
enough.
because it's always Twitter,
Yes, it's always been
always.
Twitter. It always will be. You can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter. You can follow us at PLD Products on Twitter as well. I usually try to post PLD product stuff on that Twitter feed, although I'm not so good at it. I generally you'll find it everything at retweeted at Paul_Denuzio because that has a bigger following anyway at this point. But hey, it is what it is. And I already mentioned all the shows we do here. And I've already talked about everything else. That's all there is to it, guys. We'll see you next
So
time.
that's a wrap. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's going to be a wrap. It's
a buffalo chicken wrap from Sprouts because that's what I'm going to go get.
Woo!